I came across this wild headline today and I just had to do at least a quick video on it. So this comes from the US Sun. Rare issue: Ford is forced to immediately shut down factories and halt car production as the CEO admits day-to-day struggle for the brand. The CEO previously warned that the issue would, quote, blow a hole, end quote, in the car industry. So this came out today, June 17th. As of this recording at least. So Ford's CEO, who is Jim Farley, has revealed that the brand was forced to shut down some factories thanks to an industry-wide issue plaguing automakers. Jim Farley opened up about the day-to-day struggle that has sometimes made car production impossible. This is crazy. There's the CEO, Jim Farley. He has a Chinese electric vehicle that he has said in the past that he thoroughly enjoys. It's one of the most exciting vehicles that he's ever driven. By the way, I just thought I would just throw out that random tidbit. Yeah, that actually happened. It's a true story. Anyway, the 63-year-old CEO made the admission on Friday when he spoke about supply chain issues stemming from America's tense trade relations with China. Ford and other U.S. auto brands are heavily reliant on the rival nation to get rare earth minerals, which are essential to car production. So American companies, they get about 90% of their rare earth supplies from China to build features like windshield wipers, seatbelts, and speakers. Okay, that's something that you could buy at AutoZone, something you can buy at any auto parts store. So, I guess that would affect the entire industry. But anyway, this CBS News reported that. So when President Donald Trump sparked a tit-for-tat trade war with the country that resulted in China implementing a 125% revenge tariff, automakers were left worried about the future. Now Farley has revealed that the trade issue has had devastating effects on the iconic American brand. It's day-to-day, Farley told Bloomberg TV. We had to shut down factories. It's hand-to-mouth right now. Farley didn't clarify which factories were closed or for how long. The U.S. Sun has reached out to the brand for comment, which, of course, he's not talking about the fact that cars are sitting on lots longer than ever for months. And in some cases, some of these vehicles that are made by Ford, they're sitting there for years. Like the Ford EVs are not selling at all. That Ford Mustang crossover, that monstrosity that they thought would be a good idea to turn a Ford Mustang not only into a crossover, but into an EV. Just insane to me. It's costing them. The last I heard, it was north of $60,000 or $70,000, or was it up to $100,000? It was costing them an obscene amount of money to produce each one, and they couldn't sell them for any more than like $50,000 or something like that. Just absolutely just lunacy. So, but of course they're going to put all this on China. It's all on Trump. It's all on China. It's all on the trade war. This is why Ford has to shut down factories. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Ford vehicles are absolutely overflowing on dealership lots across America. If you could go to a Ford dealership in your local area and tell me I'm wrong, put it in the comments. Am I wrong that your local Ford dealership isn't overflowing with inventory? Just tons and tons of inventory because they can't sell anything because everything's too expensive. The interest rates are too high. The banks are turning people away because the economy's on shaky ground. People are tapped out on not only their credit cards or their home equity loans and borrowing against their 401ks, but they've also taken out these auto loans in the past 3-4 years, and they're upside down on their vehicles. People are starting to figure that out too, that if you buy a brand new vehicle, you're going to instantly be wildly upside down with negative equity right out the door. And people used to get what's called gap insurance, where it would cover 125% of your vehicle in case you end up in an accident or what have you. That way, that if you owe more than your car's worth, because everybody does, especially in the first year if you buy a brand new car, then your insurance company will have you covered up to 125% of the value of the car at the time it was totaled. Well, that's not doing anybody any good anymore these days because you go out and you get a new car. I don't want to pick on Ford on this necessarily. It's basically all the automakers out there now, with the exception of just a very, very small few. You go and you buy a car for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and within a year or two, it's dropped 30, 40, 50% in its value. And it's absolutely crazy, especially with EVs, including Tesla. Their values are just absolutely imploding, and people are starting to wise up to it. Some are finding out the easy way by just doing their due diligence and looking online and just realizing that's what's happening. But a lot of people are finding out the hard way when they bought their car 3 years ago and they're kind of sick of paying $1,000 a month for their car. So they want to trade it in and try to get something a little cheaper. And they realize, oh shit, I still owe like $20,000 more than my vehicle's worth. And there were people that figured that out 3 or 4 years ago. They trade in their car with negative equity, and the bank and the dealership actually got them into a different car, and they rolled that negative equity on top of the new car that they're currently in, which is absolutely insane to me. Like, people are just so financially stupid. Not everybody, but way too many people are just absolutely financially stupid. And I know I'm trailing off from this article specifically because he's talking about the China trade issues and how 90% of the rare earth minerals are coming from China, and that's why Ford's shutting down their factories. I think that's bullshit. I think what's really happening is that nobody's buying a Ford, and they can't keep cranking them out because they're not selling them. Yeah, they might be selling a few here, a few there. I'm not saying that zero Ford motor vehicles have been sold in fiscal year 2025. Of course, people are still buying them. Of course, companies still have fleets. You know, you get big companies like Comcast or AT&T or whatever. You know, like they've got their utility vans, and they've got their pickup trucks, and construction contracting companies. You know, like all these companies that do a lot of doing service on the road, going from place to place. You know, they buy new fleets of vehicles all the time. So I'm sure Ford's doing okay in that department. I'm sure that they're propping up a lot of Ford sales. But when it comes to customers just walking in and buying brand new cars today, it is not happening anywhere near the rate that it was, let's say 3, maybe 4 years ago. Definitely 2022, but the supply chain shortage was happening back then too, but that's for a whole nother issue. I'm just saying that it's not just the China trade deal that's causing this problem for Ford. It's definitely an oversupply of inventory, a wild oversupply of inventory, in my opinion. But anyway, here, I'll actually go ahead and continue here. So I think there's a little bit more information here. Yeah, okay, so the brand shakeup came after Farley warned that Trump's sweeping 10% global tariffs, just 10%, would blow a hole in the auto industry. He feared his company would be most affected because it has already maxed out its footprint in the U.S. and has relied on overseas production. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you got to drop the price on your cars. That's what they have to do. That's not just Ford. Everybody has to lower the cost of their vehicles. People are sick of paying $60, $70, $100, $120,000 on a freaking pickup truck. I mean, look over at Stellantis with Jeeps. They're selling these high-end Jeeps, a Jeep, for $120,000, the Jeep Wagoneer. You get like that top trim model, you're spending $120,000 plus on a freaking Jeep. It's insanity. And Ford's not doing much better either. I mean, their Ford F-150s, I think, are averaging like $50,000, $60,000. It's freaking crazy for a pickup truck. So they got to get rid of a lot of this advanced components and electrical crap that they're throwing in these cars. They're way over complicating these things, not just for maintenance, but just for the bottom line, the out-the-door price. The bottom line price for these vehicles are astronomically expensive, and it's because they keep throwing too much junk into these cars. And if they actually listen to the public, they're screaming, we don't want these overcomplicated vehicles. Just give me a bare basic ass car. Let me buy a Ford F-150 that has crank windows, optional air conditioning, no cruise control, just bare bones basic. Hell, even put a stick shift in it if it'll drop the price by a little more. Give me one of those. Hell, even you can keep the carpet. You can keep the headliner. Keep the upholstery. I don't even want that if that's an option. I just want bare bones basic, brand new engine. Everything else is brand new. The headlights work, taillights work. You know, the drivetrain works well. And that's all I need, as long as it significantly cuts the price, because I can't pay $60,000 for a freaking truck. Have you noticed the economy lately? You notice the cost of rent, the mortgage rates, and everything. I mean, everything's just gone absolutely ballistic. So anyway, let me see. Let's see, where were we? So Farley told Bloomberg back in February, quote, "We're the largest U.S. producer. A lot of people don't realize that Ford exports a lot of cars outside the United States. We don't have a lot of excess capacity," end quote. However, now Farley said he has renewed hope for the industry as the U.S. struck a trade deal with China that left both countries pleased. Last week, Trump declared that the trade war was over and called his relationship with China's President Xi Jinping, quote, "excellent," end quote, after months of heated talks came to a close. So what items will be affected by the tariffs? doesn't really have to do with Ford specifically. This is just something that the Sun threw in here. Americans should prepare to see significant price changes on everything from avocados to motor vehicles under President Donald Trump's new global tariffs. They're hanging it all around Donald Trump's neck, of course. So some of the things that will surge in prices, like an unbelievable surging of prices: coffee, tea, bananas, foreign cars, sneakers, furniture, pharmaceuticals, video games, clothing, toys, washers, dryers, avocados, housing materials. I mean, it blows my mind that pharmaceuticals are even made outside of the United States anyway. It's absolutely crazy. So you mean to tell me that for, X prescription that I'm being written by my doctor, and that I have to go to the pharmacy and pay $600 a month for this prescription to help keep me alive, they're making this shit in China for like $1.50 a tablet, but I have to pay like $700, and that's with my insurance, by the way, for like, what, 30 tablets or some shit. It's absolutely insane. It's crazy. I cannot believe that they're manufacturing all that over in China right now. But yeah, coffee, I mean, that's probably the one thing on this list that I do admit that I partake in on a daily basis. But I take advantage of deals. When it's $3 off a bag, $4 off a bag, I'll buy like 8 bags all at once. Plus, go online, do a Google search, look up your coffee brand, and find it in your local area cheap. Could be CVS, could be Walgreens, it could be Publix or whatever grocery store that you live at or live near, or, what have you, Walmart. It could possibly be Target, God forbid. Just shop around and try to find it somewhere. Maybe even on Amazon. You might even find your brand of coffee that you prefer. Just look around. You don't have to go with just whatever's most convenient to you. We're in a time where you got to be nickel and diamond anywhere you can. So anyway, Farley said Ford is working with China's Ministry of Commerce to approve new trade plans one at a time. We're educating the administration, he told Bloomberg. We're educating the Chinese leadership about how important these jobs in the Midwest that are dependent, he said, of China's rare earth supply. I don't think China gives a shit about the Midwest, but what do I know? The factory shutdowns aren't the only issue plaguing Ford. The brand recently had to urgently recall over 1 million vehicles due to a dangerous glitch. Now, when I first read that, I was thinking, how many billions of dollars is that going to cost Ford? They have to recall 1 million vehicles. So, I mean, how much is that going to cost per vehicle? Multiply that by 1 million. Well, I actually found out, and I actually left a note here to myself just to make sure that I was transparent about this. Regarding the recent Ford recall involving over 1 million vehicles, it's due to a rear view camera issue. The cost to fix each vehicle, of course, is free to the owner because it always should be if it's a recall. Ford dealerships will either update the accessory protocol interface module software, which is basically free for them, or perform an over-the-air update to resolve the problem, both at no cost, according to Automotive Dive and Ford. Now, it's going to cost them employee time to do it. It might cost a little bit for them to get their hands on more equipment to do it to more customers at any given time. But it's basically just a software glitch, a software update that they just have to implement. And over the air, because, all your Fords and all the other motor vehicles that you have these days, they're all plugged into the internet. So all they have to do is just plug your car into the internet and just do the over-the-air update, and there you go, just like that. So it's not an actual hardware, like they don't have to tear apart your engine to fix anything. It's just some software thing that they have to fix. So anyway, and a popular Ford dealership was shut down to make room for an auto shop chain that's spreading its footprint across the country. Still, one savvy gearhead restored a rare 1969 Ford muscle car after pulling it from a basement where it sat for 4 years. Not that that has to do with anything whatsoever, but the Sun figured that was important information for us to know. But anyway, that's the end of that article. So I thought I would explore a couple things here. So what percentage of 2025 Ford parts are made in the USA? Well, there's a relatively small percentage. So for the Ford F-150, for instance, approximately 32% of U.S. Canadian parts content per National Highway Traffic Safety Administration data. It ranks at 58th on the 2024Cars.com American Made Index, which suggests a significant portion of parts for the Ford F-150. 68% of the parts for the Ford F-150 come from outside the United States, although the exact numbers aren't, exactly known. For the Ford Expedition, 58% of the parts are sourced outside of the U.S. Ford Ranger, let's see here, suggests 8%, but this may be a typo for 80%. Okay, so Graka's pulling that from where is he pulling it from? Ranger6g.com. I don't know, that sounds like a message board to me. Let's see. I don't even know where that's. Oh, it's a .edu site, so I mean maybe it's legit. But anyway, reported 70% U.S. Canadian content, but 2021 showed a drop to 45%. Anyway, Ford in general. Ford claims 80% of vehicles sold in the U.S. are assembled domestically, but this doesn't directly address parts content. So Ford's average U.S. Canadian parts content at over 70% for U.S. assembled vehicles. This is likely declined due to global supply chains. So anyway, like the gist of it is that the majority of parts, more or less, that are put into a Ford are not actually sourced in the US. They're not actually making the parts here, they're making them abroad. But anyway, let me move on to something else here. Let's see what I looked up for this. Okay, so how many electronic components are in Ford today, Ford vehicles today, that were not in Ford vehicles 10 years ago? So from 2015 to 2025, what is in a 2025 Ford vehicle that was not in a 2015 Ford vehicle? Like, how much crap have they really added to these vehicles? And I wanted to show the AI results from Google. Kind of vague, but I did get a lot more accurate information in a more detailed list of items specifically that were added into Ford. But I did want to point this out here that electronics, all of these electronic components that Ford has added into their vehicles over the last 10 years, they account for about 40% of a new car's cost, which is up from around 15% back in 2005. So we're going back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the electronics in a Ford vehicle accounted for 15% of the cost of the vehicle. Today, it's 40%. So if you're wondering why cars are exploding in cost, that's a pretty decent factor as to why. And this reflects their increased complexity and importance. I don't know about importance, Google, but okay. Advanced technologies, many features that are now standard or widely available were either new or rare 10 years ago. These rely heavily on new or significantly more advanced electronic components. And some other things that they have in newer Fords that they didn't have 15 years ago include things like advanced driver assistance systems, as well as infotainment systems, powertrain electrification, the electronic control of subsystems, and that's basically the gist of it for Google, but I've got more info over here on good old Grok. So the key new components and technologies in Ford vehicles from 2015 to 2025, starting with, well, here, let me read this real quick. Ford has shifted heavily toward electrification, connectivity, and advanced safety and tech, introducing many components that either didn't exist or weren't standard in their lineup a decade ago. Here's a breakdown of notable additions. Electrified powertrains. They're all electric systems, which include components like high voltage battery packs, electric motors, and inverters in vehicles like the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Mustang Mach-E. So these are their EV vehicles, which the vast majority of people who drive a Ford today, they're not driving an EV, although a few of them are. And other things include their hybrid systems. So if you have a hybrid Ford, there's a lot of components in a hybrid Ford today that were not around 10 years ago. In fact, I mean, were there really any Ford hybrids about 10 years ago? I can't think of one offhand, although I'm sure there probably was. I'm not saying there wasn't. But anyway, so the plug-in hybrid components, also plug-in hybrid, they've got a lot more now than they had 10 years ago. So moving on to advanced driver assistance systems, which Ford calls Blue Cruise. It's Ford's hands-free driving system, which they introduced in 2021. It relies on new components like advanced radar modules, also LiDAR sensors, I'm sure those aren't cheap, high-resolution cameras, again, probably not that cheap, and dedicated processing units. None of these were in 2015 Fords. Also, in their advanced driver assistance systems are sensors and cameras, 360-degree camera systems, ultrasonic sensors, and adaptive cruise control with lane centering requiring new sensor arrays and wiring harnesses. Another component are software ECUs, which modern Fords use over-the-air update-capable electronic control units with up to 150 ECUs per vehicle compared to less than 70 in 2015 models. So, and then moving on to connectivity and infotainment systems. So that kind of speaks for itself. Digital instrument clusters, those fancy flat screens that they don't have manual gauges anymore. They ripped all that out and they replaced it with all this fancy flat screen shit. And yeah, I mean, if it cracks or if, God forbid, whatever happens, I can only imagine the countless number of components that are in those things, the digital instrument clusters, but also the Forward Pass Connect right here, and then also Sync/4A. The Sync 4 system uses larger touchscreens, new processors, 5G modems. It replaces the Sync 3 of 2015, because back in 2015, like they had those little bitty square screens on the dashboards, but now they're just like covering the entire dashboard now. And these new ones, they require new display panels, GPUs, and antennas. So also materials and structural components, including the aluminum bodies on Ford vehicles these days, and also carbon fiber and battery enclosures. But that's only for certain vehicles. They're higher end stuff like the Mustang GTD and the Ford F-150 for the aluminum bodies. Definitely not music to one's ears if they're prone to getting into a fender bender. I remember once upon a time, the Ford F-150 was a freaking tank, man. You can bump into one going like 5 miles an hour and it wouldn't even put a scratch on it. Like not even as much as a scratch. Something like aluminum, I'm sure it's going to crunch it up nice and good and costly. So moving on to engines and transmissions, the EcoBoost V6 variants. That's also included in some of the Fords these days. Let's see here. It looks like so the newer EcoBoost engines, the 3.5 liter in the Raptor R, they have updated turbochargers and fuel injectors and intercoolers for higher output, which is 720 horsepower in the Raptor R versus 380 horsepower in the 2015 SVT Lightning. Absolutely crazy. I mean, I can only imagine how much pressure they're shoving into those cylinders from the fuel, the direct injected engines. It's probably like 1,000 pounds of freaking pressure. Anyway, so also 10-speed transmissions introduced in 2017 and electric drivetrains that have since come out since 2015. And moving on to charging and energy systems, that's mainly for electric vehicles and whatnot. And then I think that's, finally safety and comfort features, which include active aero features like deployable spoilers for the Mustang GTD or grille shutters, which uses new actuators and motors, crazy. Massage seats, fancy, high-end models like that in the Expedition. They have new seat modules with air bladders and also acoustic glass, standard in many 2020s models for noise reduction, which were not common in 2015. Okay, so the glass that they're using, like the windshield and the windows, they're making Fords with acoustic glass now, which that doesn't sound cheap. At least not to me, it doesn't. And then also airbag systems. They've got newer side curtain and knee airbags. They even have airbags for your knees now. Isn't that awesome? And they require additional inflators and sensors. So all of this put together is why you're having to spend like $50, $60, $70, $100,000 on a freaking vehicle these days. Among other reasons, this isn't exclusively the only reason, but this is definitely a major factor. Like I said, a lot of this should just come optional, and some of it actually does come optional, but a lot of this stuff is being pushed by the federal government with regulations, especially from the EPA, to make everything all energy efficient and carbon neutral and going green and all that bullshit. And it's also, I mean, it's turning our vehicles into disposable vehicles because the engines aren't going to last anywhere nearly as long as they used to, especially like back in like the 90s or even in the 2000s. I'm sure engines were built far better back then than they are now. So anyway, let's see here. So estimating the number of new components. So a modern Ford vehicle, and they're using the 2025 Ford F-150 as an example, because I think, isn't that still the best-selling vehicle in America? It has 30,000 parts in total, which is the industry average, apparently. That is insane. But EVs, like the Ford F-150 Lightning, they have fewer moving parts because it's an electric vehicle. It's not a gas vehicle. But even the EVs, they have 20,000 parts. But included in those parts are complex electrical components, obviously. But also Blue Cruise, that hands-free cruise control system or whatever, that alone adds between 50 and 100 parts, which includes sensors and cameras and wiring and ECUs. as well as in the electrified powertrains, they add between 500 and 1,000 parts to the vehicle, which include battery cells and cooling systems and motors and all that fun stuff. So anyway, the total estimate across Ford's lineup, thousands of new components are new or significantly redesigned since 2015. And a rough estimate suggests 10 to 20% of parts, which vary between 2,000 parts and 6,000 parts per vehicle, are entirely new on a 2025 model Ford, as opposed to a 2015 model Ford. So there's up to 6,000 parts on your 2025 Ford that were not on any 2015 Ford, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. That is way too many parts. So, I mean, if you're throwing a number like that, like, it makes me wonder, like, damn, dude, how are these things not like $300,000? I mean, what the hell? But anyway, driven by EVs, ADAS, and connectivity. This varies by model. EVs have more new parts than ICE vehicles. Well, yeah, because EVs, Ford wasn't really in the EV business back in 2015. But yeah, anyway, it just finishes up with just to wrap things up kind of thing, as Grok likes to do. But I think that's basically all I got. Yeah, that's it. I already covered that the Ford recall, 1 million vehicles. It's just a software update, but yeah, anyway, that's pretty wild, pretty crazy that Ford, they're at least claiming that they're dealing with this whole China trade tariffs and all that fun stuff that's going on, which I'm sure they are. I'm sure that tariffs they're not going to do nothing. I mean, tariffs are going to affect Ford and every other motor vehicle company in some way or another. But at the end of the day, you got to get your prices down. And as they keep overly complicating these vehicles and making them more and more complex and more expensive to fix, you're not doing any favors for the consumer. At the end of the day, the consumer, they're going to buy what they can afford. And honestly, they're going to wind up just buying what they want. And if they don't want a vehicle that, if it like an electric vehicle, EV, or if it's self-driving, or if it has all this navigation crap or all these flat screens, start-stop feature, apparently a lot of people hate that. And keyless entry with this whole key fob business, like, these cars, they don't even have like an actual real key anymore. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, look, I drive a 99. My car was made in 1990. Actually, my car was made in June of 1998. And it's a Mitsubishi Mirage, a little two-door coupe, little stick shift, as basic as you can get. I'm pretty sure it was the bare basic model that was available at the time. I absolutely love it. It is so easy to work on. Even its small size, there's still a lot of room to work under the hood to change. I mean, I've changed all kinds of stuff out of it. It took me about 45 minutes to change all 4 of my fuel injectors from start to finish. From the time I popped the hood to the time I closed the hood, it took me about 45 minutes. And I am no expert when it comes to maintenance. I found out how to change the fuel injectors on YouTube. Watched a DIY video. This is how you change it. I just mimicked what it was showing me in the video. Had it all done in about 45 minutes. Now I don't have to use all that snake oil fuel additive nonsense that you have to dump into your gas tank to keep your fuel injectors all nice and clean. I don't have to worry about that anymore because I put in brand new fuel injectors. It was really nice. And apparently a lot of 90s cars are just that easy. Spark plugs, it's like 5 minutes. It takes no time at all. But these brand new vehicles, they bury that stuff so deep inside there, and it's filled with all of this overly complex equipment that you have to remove like damn near half the engine just to get to something as simple as a freaking spark plug. It's crazy. And that's why, God willing, I'm just going to keep driving the car I have for another, 26, 27 years. If at all costs, if it's going to keep running, I've been maintaining it very strictly by the book, which is why it's at 241,500 miles. And it still runs absolutely great. Doesn't leak a drop, doesn't smoke at all, starts up every time, runs absolutely great. So nice. I take my hand off the wheel. It doesn't pull to the right or the left. I just changed the struts, or not the struts, it was the struts or the coils or whatever. No, it was the struts. The air thing, whatever the hell that thing's called. Yeah, they're called struts. I changed the struts back in September of this past year, among many other things. Now, there were a lot of things that broke on it. I had to fix the exhaust manifold about a year ago because it cracked almost completely in half. So that had to get changed, which I did on my own. Thank God that was easy too. Plenty of room to work on. I changed out the catalytic converter, Many other things, EGR valve, I changed that out because I thought it was broken, but it wasn't. It turned out to be the exhaust manifold. I actually changed a lot of stuff last year thinking that that was the problem when it wasn't. It was the exhaust manifold the whole time. I just didn't see the crack because I wasn't looking at the right place. Anyway, whatever. The point being is that back in the 90s, even in the 2000s, yeah, they were starting to get complicated back then. The vehicles, they were starting to get a little complex into the late 2000s, but throughout most of the 2000s, they were relatively easy to work on. They started to implement those plastic beauty covers on the top of the engines back in the 2000s, but they were still pretty easy to rip off of the top of the engine back then. I'm assuming they're not anymore. I'm assuming it's probably a whole ordeal just to get the freaking plastic cover off the engine these days. But yeah, back then it was easy. The engines were smaller. There were far less components. Compared to what we're dealing with today, it was a dream. And I consider myself extremely lucky that I was able to find the car that I have now, which just by coincidence, I bought it in 2015 and I only paid $1,100 cash for it. So glad I found it. Thank God the person that I bought it from, they apparently took good care of it because it's still running great to this day. But anyway, not going to hold you up any longer. I got to get to sleep. It's getting late. So thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. See you later.